Before we get started, special thanks to my parents for buying me a new phone on which I am recording this episode, and to Deceptiwave on Twitter and YouTube for editing a scene at the end of this video. If you want to check out Deceptiwave's YouTube channel or Twitter page, links to both of them will be in the description. Now then, on to the, well, I'd call it a review, but it's more like a verbal annihilation.
I thought it was over. I thought I was finally safe. After 12 months of agonizingly poor distribution and monumental disappointments, it felt like we were finally safe from the worst that Earthrise had to offer. But yet again, Earthrise managed to prove me wrong in the worst way possible. I had abstained from more figures in that line than I had in Siege, and I am glad for it. But even now, after all this time, there is still one figure I am obligated to review. One piece of crap that deserves my scorn and ire more than anything else in the universe. And what might that be, you ask? Well, to answer that question...
Salutations, denizens of the internet. I'm Firebite27, and let us commence our analysis of Earthrise / Kingdom Arcee.
Let's start out with the positives of the vehicle mode. First of all, it's a pretty close match to the cartoon model, if a little bit bulbous. The paintwork is also acceptable. I won't say great, but it picks out all the details that are quintessentially Arcee, from the trunk to the hood, headlights, and cockpit. And she's got some great weapon storage right under the hood of her car mode. Oh god damn it. What you now see in front of you is essentially Arcee's entire robot mode crumbled up into some exotic yoga pose. That's right, she's a shell former, but unlike the Siege Seeker, her shell doesn't do a damn thing that's intriguing in the least. Also, the shell leaves two massive gaps, one at the front end, which basically has the pistol acting as the entire barrier between you and seeing the robot crumpled up underneath, and the back has absolutely nothing covering up the robot bits underneath. And since that's technically her tush under there, I'm gonna say it looks really indecent to look at the car mode from this angle. And remember how I was complimenting the paint just recently? Well, it's not actually that good because it turns out that it's chalk white, which is a term I like to use to refer to paint that is basically the equivalent of Games Workshop gray. It's applied far too thinly, it chips easily, and it just looks and kind of feels like a primer coat for a custom figure. Also, is it just me, or does Arcee's alternate mode just seem completely illogical? You'd have to yeet yourself over a quarter of the car's width in order to get to the seats, a seating space which is also far too small for even a Titan Master to end up in. Unfortunately, Arcee is far from the only fembot to suffer from the shell former curse. Her predecessor, Siege Chromia, was worse off in a lot of ways, but also better off in some other ways. Please note that the torso being visible from the top was not one of these positives. Of course, some of you might try to argue that this is the only way certain fembots can be done, as they are far too slender to support the bulk of a vehicle mode, and that they must have faux parts in order to transform into vehicles. And to that I say, shut up you fucking moron! They've done it in the past with the femcons that I own. They didn't need faux parts. The parts formed a little, sure, but they didn't need full-on faux part or backpack, for that matter. Okay, I think I've made a big enough deal over the car mode now. Time for the size comparisons. Here's Earthrise Arcee next to my last review, Kingdom Cheetor, the last female Transformers character I reviewed, Cyberverse Clobber, the only other fembot in my collection, Siege Netflix Chromia, the best female Transformer in my collection, Kingdom Vertebrake, a standard Qtama, and Fraudside. Of course, this vehicle mode is only 1/3 of why this figure is a failure, so let's find out why the other 2/3 are a failure by getting into the transformation. Fuck you.
Always look on the bright side of life.
And now we have the robot mode. If there was any one word I could use to describe the transformation, it would be useless. It goes beyond the faux forming of the third version of Masterpiece Optimus Prime, and straight into we don't give a fuck territory. Not a single part from the robot mode becomes a part of the vehicle mode, and not a single part from the vehicle mode becomes a part of the robot mode. Heck, there's even a faux version of the chest from robot mode that is supposed to become the hood of the car mode on the backpack. Generations Arcee didn't have this problem, and she's over half a decade old. Heck, even the Masterpiece version, a line which is now famous for faux forming, seems to be doing the chest as the hood of the actual car. That's how much of a failure this transformation is. And on top of that, if that wasn't enough already, this backpack has the sheer audacity to parts form! And further to that, it doesn't even parts form into something sensible, like a shield. Yeah, in this case, a shield would have been somewhat remotely sensible for a huge chunk of the alt mode. It's flat, it's big, and would cover her. But no, instead, it basically turns into a figure stand. I'm sorry, hoverboard, I say with the biggest air quotes physically possible. To give the femcons in my collection some credit, they at least don't have any faux parts or backpacks that they need to transform. Or at least not to the same degree as the female Autobots in my collection. But even though there are female Transformers that don't need a backpack in my collection, it still sucks that basically the two most prominent female characters from the entire franchise are reduced to this. They might as well not have bothered making it a Transformer at all and just made it a regular action figure. And heck, they're doing a Prime Arcee for the red line, so maybe do one of the G1 Arcee? And those were just the issues with the transformation. The issues with the robot mode are far more numerous. Like how the face is totally unpainted except for the eye. Or how standing the figure is basically impossible with the additional weight from the back of the car on it. And how it's still pretty much easier to stand up the figure if you stand it on top of the hoverboard. Oh, and the tiny factoid that I just really despise the original Arcee character design is another factor. And sure, back in the 80s, maybe it was fine for this design to, be the way it was. But these days it feels like it's a little bit sexist? Look, I really don't want to get political, even though my initial plans for the script were to have a segment which was political, but essentially my opinion boils down to the fact that this design is outdated, and it doesn't come across as a Cybertronian warrior, it comes across as a Cybertronian swimsuit model, and that ends up necessitating the garbage transformation. Oh, and need I forget to mention that the extent of her characterization in G1 was basically her relationships with Hot Rod and Springer? Yeah, the G1 cartoons version of Arcee does not deserve nearly as much credit as the fandom gives her. Arcee works best when she's portrayed like she was in the IDW comics and the Cyberverse cartoon. She's a badass warrior. She's not some princess in a castle that needs you to rescue her. She'll be the one rescuing you when your plan goes awry and you end up in the dragon's horde. And furthermore, why are people going gaga for the Elita 1 version of this mold? It's basically the same figure, both a new head and chest. There is literally nothing different about it apart from those two insignificant facts. And it should be ignored for that, and for the failings of the base mold. If the base mold sucks, then it doesn't deserve to receive two exclusive versions. Heck, it doesn't deserve to be reissued in Kingdom with a trading card and sticker. It does not deserve any of this status. Now, before I have an aneurysm, I'm going to let Maya talk about the articulation.
Head is on a ball joint, shoulders can spread out and rotate. Biceps swivel, wrist spin inward, waist swivels, each thigh has two swivels, though the lower of the two breaks the sculpt, a double bend at the knee and a toe bend. The articulation is good, but the back weighs it down.
Thank you, Maya. Okay, I think I've calmed down a little. So, before we close out the episode, let's do some size comparisons. Here's Arcee next to Cheetor, Clobber, Vertebrake, Chromia, Akutama, Akan, and Fraudside. In closing, this figure is just as bad as I was told it would be. I thought it was growing on me for a few minutes, but apparently not. This review has been a lot of fun to make because I got to tear into this. And that's honestly something I don't really say a lot. But this is the one time where being mean-spirited and unfair to a figure felt fun. And boy, do not even consider buying this figure. It sucks. Just don't even look at it twice if you see it in the stores.
So, in conclusion, is Arcee really all she's cracked up to be? Is she really that bad? Does she deserve a spot in your collection? Oh, who the hell am I kidding? Of course this figure doesn't deserve a place in your collection. If it weren't a Transformer and just a normal action figure, this figure would be an acceptable 7 out of 10. I'd be happy with it. I'd encourage that you buy it. But considering that it is in fact a Transformer, and the puzzle aspect of the transformation is a complete and utter joke, then I don't feel comfortable giving it that score. And instead, I shall have to give it a 0 out of 10. And of course, now that I've completed the segment of this video where I verbally annihilate this figure, it's time for me to physically annihilate it. Hope you're all ready for this one! Let's go! Smell ya later.